The first, so Liz, do you want to talk a little bit about what an archetype is, and
Sure. Yep.
and then we can ask some questions and then jump into the presentation.
Yeah, and feel free to put any comments, any ahas, or anything in the chat, especially if you're one that's taking information in, but you still want to share. We love this to be as engaging as you want it to be. And then you also sometimes just need some information to share. So what is an archetype? An archetype is based off of the Carl Jung personalities. He had noticed that people had different personality traits that overlapped or were very similar to other people. And, I'm just going to tell you right now, two things. If we cut anyone open, like if you guys cut me open and looked inside, you're not going to go, oh, there's an archetype. That's not how this works, right? It's not like you're born with these archetypes. It's actually something that you develop over time. And in a way, they're kind of not true. It's just a basis for understanding of some automatic patterns that you have in your life. That's it. So consider this kind of like a starting point of understanding part of patterns and relationships that you might have with money. You can't always shift it or change it if you don't know what kind of automatic patterns already exist. And some of them are very natural. And the other thing to keep in mind with regards to archetype before I go and share other stuff is whenever we take any kind of assessment, and I'm sure people have done, the Enneagram or Myers-Briggs or any of these other assessment types, just remember and keep in mind that this is really an FYI. It's not to be used as a weapon against yourself, your spouse, children, or anyone else, right? So when I learned that I was an Enneagram 9, I didn't go around and go, I'm a 9 and I am reacting to your 4-ness right now, right? That's not really how it works. It's just an understanding of like, oh, I give up my own agenda for other people and I'm getting angry right now because I'm losing my control over my agenda. And that's really all it is an ability to have a little bit of an awareness. And that awareness can sometimes help you break some patterns or see the patterns that are coming up that aren't working for you anymore so you can shift them. So that's what an archetype is. This is a really fun and engaging conversation. Dawn, do you have something you want to add?
I was just going to say that there are some archetypes that I'm going to say a couple of names, and you will have an automatic way of thinking about these particular kinds of people that are pretty much well held by the community. So if I say, what comes to mind when you think of a mom, right? You either have a really strong relationship to a mom figure, or you had another kind of relationship to a mom figure. But there are people in society, and they all say moms do this or moms do this. Presidents do this. Janitors do this, right? They have, we have, you can say these kinds of symbols or names, and there's automatic things that you say about them based on your past. So these particular archetypes are a lot more fun than some of those. And it's a way to kind of explore, how to be whatever you want to be around money. And what we find is that how you do anything is how you do everything. So even if this isn't about, if you don't want to look at it from the money point of view, you can look at it from the, how is your career going, or how clean is your house, or how are your relationships going with your friends and your family. It's the same kind of thing you're going to find in more than one place in your life. And so if you're not ready to look at it from the financial piece, no problem, because we do know that almost every conversation has something to do with money, and therefore money's going to show up in this conversation no matter what. So I think that to kick us off, the one thing we like to do is we like to ask a question, because when you have a question in front of you, and then when you listen to the overview of the archetypes, you'll be able to use the archetypes and the question at the same time. So I know that you folks you're now in at least one of the sessions, right, of Tisha's 12-week curriculum. I don't know if this is the only one you're attending, or if you're attending all 12, or you're attending some of them, but you've made a decision to learn something new. And one of the things you might want to think about is, we'd like you to think about is, if in 5 years, you could have something like really, no kidding, if there's something that you really wanted in 5 years, what would that be? So for example, for me, what I would really like, my daughter's graduating from college, and I would like for her to be able, she'll be about halfway through her PhD, her doctorate in music. And I would like to not have any kind of student loans associated with her PhD, that she had, that there's another way that we have accomplished that. So that's a really big dream that I have, is how does that get funded? So think about something like that. Liz, do you have something you could use as an example?
Yeah.
So
My husband and I, we have this really bad habit of working really hard sometimes. And well, we must be really busy. We say yes to a lot of things in the community and a lot of other things. So for us to really truly relax, we have to get outside of the city. And we need to go to the lake or the mountains or the forest or something like that. So I really want to get a getaway cottage in the woods or by a lake, so that within 3 hours, so that when we can come to a weekend, we can just get away and not really worry about anything with regards to the chores, community, or business. So that's it for me.
so Galen, is that how you say it? Galen, you raised your hand?
I use my earphones, and I don't have the kind where you can speak and hear at the same time. Okay, I would very much not like to have to worry about money anymore. I would like to learn how to manage it so that, well, see, I'm 67 years old and I'm renting a room in someone else's house. I can't even afford to live in a place of my own. And I've been here for 10 years. And I'd like to grow
Okay.
very badly. But one of my dreams is when I talk about retirement, my dream about retirement is not doing nothing. My dream about retirement is that, number one, I'd like to have a mate. And number two is that rather than need to work a full-time office desk job, I mean, I've had this picture for a year now during the, it's a picture I love to, oh, and I also want to go to Israel. But I would like to be able to teach Zumba Gold and a new format I'm learning called Drums Alive to the senior community while I live in a 55 plus area. I mean, I've got this all pictured. So
good.
I would love to manifest. I would love to
Great.
manifest that whole scenario.
Okay, good.
Does
So
that
keep
sound
that
weird?
No, not at all. Not at all. There's more women than you can even imagine who wish for things like that. And they are living in apartments, or they're in relationships that aren't working, or they have never been married, or there way more than anyone would ever imagine. And so it's a very, very good and doable and beautiful dream. So keep that in mind as we go into the description of the archetypes. Okay.
You know, just wanted to say, I was going to run off and do errands, and something told me I needed to be here, and not just for the recording. I needed to attend this. So thank you.
Sure. And Liz and I are available after this to talk to you about other things as well, if you need more after this program. So
Okay.
yeah, thank you. And thanks for your vulnerability, Gail. And they really, it takes something to share in front of a group.
Yep.
So I appreciate it.
Anybody else?
Yeah. And there's no requirement to share it out loud. We just want to make sure you have it going into the conversation, but we'd love to hear any goals or dreams you'd like to share. All right. So what Liz and I are going to do, so if you have taken the assessment, we'd love it if you put your top 3 archetypes in the chat box. That would be really great for Liz and I to know what archetypes are, quote unquote, in the room. And then I'm going to pull up the presentation. And
I'm going to write mine in as well.
I forgot mine.
so, so just to let you know, the whole purpose of this presentation is really to help you see how your money personality is working today. There's no personality that's better than another. All of the personalities have the ability to be wealthy, right? Or to have the amount of financial knowledge and wherewithal that you would like it to have. What we find though is that 3 personalities tend to work together depending on the situation. And you tend to have those same 3 personalities throughout your life, but there will be some others that kind of jump up when the time is needed. And as we describe them, you'll notice that you could probably see yourself in all 8 of them, but some will dominate more than others. All right, so I'm going to start with the first one. Hang on, I thought I was going to start with the first one. So the first one is the ruler. So the ruler is my second archetype. So with the ruler, if you think about a ruler, I really kind of like Julie Andrews in the movie of The Princess Diaries, if you've ever seen it. So one of my daughter and I's kind of go-to chick flicks when we want to feel motivated. You know, how do you take a girl from nothing and turn her into a queen? And the thing about Julie Andrews, what I really like is that she's overlooking a kingdom. It's not a really big kingdom, but it's got enough in it. It's got a lot of different kind of people who live in the kingdom. And she's always thinking about everyone in the kingdom. And she's creating an environment where everyone can thrive. She's always thinking about what's next for ourselves? How do we deal with women's rights? How do we make sure that a woman could be a queen without having to be married? Right? So they're always thinking about everyone and the future. But when you have that kind of responsibility or that way of thinking, whether you're a ruler in your family, like you're the one who's responsible for everyone, or in a department, or maybe it's a club of some sort, it doesn't matter. You are always looking at what kind of resources do I need next? You'll start to notice we need more groceries, or we need more paper, or we need more people who can run social media, right? You're always starting to look out to see what are the resources that you need. So you're always chasing money. If you think about it, in the old days of kings, when they would take over other kingdoms, it's because they needed something for the most part. So the other thing about a ruler is they're rule oriented, probably where the name comes from. So in a kingdom, you have to follow the rules. Otherwise, there's discipline, right? You go to jail, or you have to pay reparations. So there's always rules, and a ruler needs everybody to kind of line up behind them so they can keep the whole kingdom moving forward. So Liz.
Okay, connector. I have a very strong connector in me. It's my third one. And connectors really weigh their wealth with regards to who they surround themselves with. And the more that they have these relationships, the more that they feel extremely abundant. And the abundance comes from knowing that these relationships really have resources. So for example, a connector, if they wanted to get away for a weekend, would put the word out to their friends and family and say, hey, my spouse and I really need a getaway weekend. Anybody have a place that we can use? And they almost always get handed something because of the kinds of relationships that they have. So you'll know you're a connector if you have kind of that connection automatically in your head, that when you meet somebody, you know exactly who you're going to connect them to, because you're going to remember certain details about anybody. So Tisha, for example, if you tell me something about like one of your favorite things, and we haven't talked in a year, but I noticed it's your birthday coming up, I may give you something really special that you mentioned once, that you love Japanese goldfish. And I may give you kind of like a painting of a Japanese goldfish. And you're like, oh my God, how did you know this? And that's what a connector does. They remember the intricate details. So what does this mean with regards to money? Well, the interesting thing is that their wealth comes from the relationships, but their relationships are more important than anything else. So if they were a business owner, they have a really hard time charging their friends money for gift services or products. They often give it away. So that is something to really keep in mind with regards to that. A connector also, if they're out to dinner with somebody and the person doesn't have their wallet, they're like, oh, I'll get it. But they might have a hard time going back and asking for the friend to pay them back because they don't want to lose that friendship. They're like, oh, it was just this one time. I'm not going to worry about it. But they would also do that with everyone. One more thing that might be important for those of you, that have connector inside of your personality is if you're in sales and you have this pipeline of people, you want to give white glove service because you want them to remember and be loyal to you. And you're eventually going to probably be friends with them anyway, right? So because of that, if you have too many people in the pipeline, you're going to probably drop the whole pipeline or it's going to get bottlenecked because you're not able to give white glove service to everybody. Yeah.
So the next one is the alchemist. So the alchemist is someone who dreams really big dreams and they love to champion others. So Oprah for us, tends to come to mind when we think about an alchemist. But an alchemist really, they're very good at manifesting. They're kind of like, I need a something or other, and it just shows up. It's unpredictable, but it just kind of shows up. Now, they tend to be a little bit unconventional and idealistic, which is great. We need alchemists who kind of pull us forward into the future with new ideas and new dreams. It's alchemists who want to make sure no one is left hungry, wants to make sure that every child is educated. They want to make sure that everybody has a roof over their head. And that's not like airy fairy kind of dreams. Those are really big, important problems that need to be addressed. But an alchemist can be so big in their dreaming that they really want everybody just to do the right thing. And so they hate asking people for money, because if you just did the right thing, everybody would be fed. The people around you would be taken care of. We wouldn't have litter in the streets if you just picked up after yourself, right? So the alchemist has these really, really big dreams. So they wind up rebelling against asking people for money. They do not like it if they see someone spend a lot of money on a house or shoes or something extravagant when down the street from that person, there may be somebody who is homeless or hungry. It really makes them crazy. So their job is to transform their relationship to money and to understand why people spend the money the way they do. And once they do that, they can ask those people for the money to get the projects done that are important to them.
Nurture is my number one. And I think all women who are mothers have this somewhere in them, at least when their children are at home. Nurturers' biggest challenge is to become their own inner sponsor and cheerleader like they are for their children or for their loved ones. So nurturers are very generous and giving. They're naturally good with money because they know they need it to take care of the family. They may not always see the gift and be able to be good at the gift, but if it comes down to it, kind of like you were saying, Tisha, 2012, you just had to go out and do it, right? They're naturally going to be good at money because they really need their loved ones to be taken care of, but they will also spend more than they have to make sure their loved ones are taken care of. They will spend all the money they have, if need be, for their loved ones. So it's kind of like when you get on the airplane, they say put on your own oxygen mask first and then put on oxygen mask of the people you love around you. It's kind of the same thing here. Is in that process of getting to a healthy, wealthy nurturer is kind of saying, how do I really meet my own needs and make myself my own project? And so I can take care of myself and my loved ones. It doesn't necessarily have to be an either or conversation. It could be a yes and conversation. But before that happens, the nurturer also gets to a point of martyrdom and resentment because they may be spending more money or more attention, more time on somebody else's needs and agendas than their own. And what they really are looking for at that point in time is, I take care of everybody else. Who's going to take care of me? And what they need to realize is nobody's going to take care of them until they do. And then everything else that naturally falls into place. The nurturer also, if they are a business owner, has a hard time charging what they're worth because they know what people need. And they're like, oh, if I just give it to them, it's going to be a better world anyway. And I don't know if they can afford it. So I'm just going to give it to them. Right. So things to keep in mind with regards to the nurturer.
So the Maverick, this is my number one. So the Maverick is really about, the inner rebel with a cause. If you talk to before I realized how the Maverick played a role in my life, if someone was coaching me, I would always be coaching them to take more risk, because Mavericks love to take risks. They love things that are complicated. They love to jump without thinking. The epitome right now, a modern Maverick is Elon Musk, right? He's thinking about going to Mars. He's getting us closer and closer, going to Mars. But I have to tell you, when you first started talking about Mars and the risks, right? And there's no safety net. He needed to enroll a lot of other people who had more conservative points of view so that he could get the money that he needed to go after it. So a Maverick loves to, it's not like a squirrel shiny object thing. It's, I want to try that thing because of the risk. It's the risk that keeps them excited and active, but they don't always build a strong foundation. So what happens is they're used to their money going up and down and up and down and up and down, which can be really problematic in relationships. It's problematic when you're trying to get a loan. It's problematic when, if you get sick and you have medical bills and you might be in a downward spiral of your money at that particular moment. So it's important for a Maverick to really build a stronger foundation and to enroll enough people so that they can manage for the risk so that more people will be involved. Because the other thing about a Maverick is people say, oh my gosh, look at that Maverick. Look what he's doing. Look what she's doing. Isn't that cool? And then, if in my case, I'll say, hey, well, come on along. And they're like, oh, no, you go right ahead. You go right ahead. I'll watch from over here. I think it's cool, but you do that without me. So that's the way of a Maverick. And you should know this, so as me as a Maverick, and Liz's number one is that of a nurturer. It can be very interesting some days when we're trying to accomplish things. Just think about that.
All of my training in the financial world is accumulator training, right? So accumulators, they know the rules, and they say, here are the rules. Here's the box that you have to live in, the 4 walls, and here's what's tried and true. And they're a little bit more cautious because they feel like if they stay inside the box, because that's the tried and true, it's going to work. Accumulators are so motivated by being financially independent and responsible because they never, ever, ever want to be dependent upon someone else. Okay. So that's a big motivator for accumulators, but they also are going to do a lot of research. They think they're very financially savvy. They're going to do a lot of research, and then they're going to be cautious, and then they're going to go, well, I'm not sure I'm ready. I've done the research. I know this is what I'm going to do, but I don't know if I'm ready yet. So they're completely opposite of the Maverick in that regard. They do the more tried and true, they do the research, and they step cautiously. So that's some things to keep in mind. Now, you may be an accumulator in many places in your life. Like you might be an accumulator with regards to exercise or nutrition, and you may not know how to translate that yet to money. So you may have scored really high as an accumulator, and you're like, but wait a minute. That doesn't ring true for me. It may be that you just haven't translated it. That's all. If you know how to do certain things in your life, you have the gifts, you have the talents, you have this part of your personality. This may not have translated. This is definitely the more logical side of money, is naturally comes to the accumulator. So, yeah.
See if there we go. The celebrity. So the celebrity is one of mine. I love looking at Kim Kardashian in this money suit, right? But a celebrity, as you can imagine, is someone who is the center of attention. So whether they're as big and bold as Kim Kardashian, or it's just, a 2-year-old who is the center of attention at a family gathering, it's still this notion of an individual who needs people around them to reassure them that they are good, great, wonderful, beautiful, right? It's that same kind of, they're alone, but they need their team to remind them of how great they are. So they tend to then be good leaders because they have a lot of people around them. They can galvanize a large group, right? If you need something done, you know who in your neighborhood to call. You know, they pick up the phone, make a couple of phone calls, and they've got 20 people at a fundraiser or 5 people who are helping out at a food pantry or something. You know, people like this, and they are magnetic and confident. They just can't help it. They walk into a room and they own the room. But status for a celebrity is really, really important. It's and COVID has not been good for the celebrities of the world. They don't know what to do when there aren't people around them reminding them, you know, of that they've got really good ideas. They're very externally driven to accomplish things. So they start spending a lot of money to remind them of how great they are. Now, so it isn't like, oh, I'm so sad, I should go spend money. But you may be someone who you really are externally driven and need the approval of other people. And so you'll find yourself buying something that feels good for a short period of time. So that is the celebrity. Yeah, it doesn't want to switch. There we go.
So this is the last one, and then we'll talk about how these things work together, and I'll even start that conversation a little bit, or even talk about, you know, what ahas you might have had. The romantic. You know, Don was mentioning earlier that there's 2 sides of money, this logical side, which is the practical application of the money, and the puzzle, the logical puzzle of how to make the things work. And then there's this experiential side. The romantic epitomizes this experiential side. They are so good at living life to its fullest extent. They believe that everything in life is to be lived, and everything in life is to be experienced. And there's always more money to be had, some way, shape, or form. They're going to spend money on things because they deserve it, and they will live in the moment. Now, we all have part of this inside of all of us, right? But this is definitely one of my top archetypes, and so is the accumulator, which is really funny. We'll get to that in a minute. But the romantic is the one that's going to show people how to really embrace self-love. So to do things for yourself, to go to the spa, to go on that trip you aspire to take, to go visit some friends, to go for the hike in the woods, the things that in life that are based on you deserve it. And especially when the pandemic really hit, and, you know, we weren't really leaving our house, and I was like, oh gosh, I need something outside of what we have in the house to experience. So I found myself buying a little nicer cheese or a nicer wine in my online grocery store thing that we'd go and pick up. And because I just needed something to experience and to feel. And the romantic will be that person that helps you feel alive. Money is a vehicle to live your life. Now, because of this, the challenges for the romantic is that they often can overspend and bury their head in the sand. They don't necessarily realize that the checkbook has to balance, right? Because more money will just somehow appear. And they're the ones, and we all have this, they're the ones that often have a surrogate to make up for any needs that weren't met of attention or love from their parents or family growing up, that I'm not deserving, I'm not worthy, that kind of thing. So these are the 8 archetypes, and you have, you know, your top ones, and you also have how they work together. And, you know, it's so funny that my top 2 or my top several are accumulator and romantic. And sometimes they go at war because the accumulator is in a conversation of either or, like, no, you can't be spending money on that because we need to be spending money on this. And my romantic is like, well, we deserve it, right? So it's a really interesting conversation sometimes how those things work out and play together. So I kind of like to see everyone, see what questions you have. Are you okay if we take these down? Do you want us to leave this up so you can kind of refer to them as you have questions?
I'll go ahead and take it down.
Okay.
I think, so like Liz, one of the things that we wanted you to be thinking about, and Liz will kind of help us through this discussion, but remember when I said about my daughter, and I was hoping that my daughter would be able to, you know, she'd be halfway through her her PhD experience, and there's no money involved in the process from my end. So the Maverick in me is like, you know, of course you're going to do it. Let's get you to the biggest, best school ever. And we are, you know, I'm going to help you drive it. We're going to make this thing happen. Let's start working on your applications now. How come you're not working on it? Let's go, let's go, let's go. There's so much to do. It's really, you know, we got to think about this. We got to think about that. We got to think about this. And then the nurturer in me wants to kind of hold back and say, okay, but first I have a little bit of nurture when it comes to my daughter. It's the only place that it shows up. And she's going to be moving home here into my house in June when she graduates. And it's like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with my daughter moves home? And how are we going to live in the same household? And do I need to do some things to make sure she's ready and she's comfortable and we can live together and we can do these things? And the Maverick is like, screw that. Tell her to go get her own apartment. She can make it happen. We'll find the money. She can go get it, right? So I have these two that are fighting one another all the time. And I just have to recognize which one's in charge based on the goal that I've set out. So Liz, you have one about your cottage, right, that you want. And then we'd like to hear from folks. What are you seeing and what are you noticing about how your archetypes might work together?
Well, you know, when I sit there and look at this cottage and this getaway weekend, you know, the romantic in me will go, ooh, this is what it looks like. And it's going to be 3 or 4 bedrooms because we want to bring other people with us. And we want to be able to, when the kids get older, they can bring their girlfriends, their boyfriends, their friends, and also use it. And we're going to big fat family gatherings. And then the other part of me is like, no, it's supposed to be a little romantic getaway for just my husband and I. And that's kind of like what it's going to be used for. But then the accumulator goes, oh, but what about the money? So the romantic sees this really beautiful experience that we're looking to have that brings forward the connection and the rejuvenation that we're going to get out of the weekend. And then the accumulator is like, well, let's do the research, tried and true, and never really wants to pull the trigger because that means we're out of the money. It's no longer in the bank account once we make the purchase. So that's kind of like the interesting conversation that will sometimes happen in my head. Yeah.
And the other thing that will happen is how it works with other people. So I mentioned before, you know, my number 1 is Maverick and Liz's number 1 is Nurturer. So while we both come from a lot of experience doing things, and then we came into our business together, she has approached her business from a nurturer point of view where she's taking care of people. And I'm like, how long have you been coaching that person? Is it time to raise the price? Is it time to do this? Is it time to do that? Or we need to be on a big stage. How can we get on the stage with Tony Robbins? And Liz is like, I don't know if I'm ready to travel yet. We're not that big. We should really be thinking differently. But when we realize it's the Maverick talking versus the nurturer talking, then we can have a new conversation about where we're headed based on our goal and our dream. And it's not, Liz, I can't believe you're trying to hold me back. Quit being my mom. Which is what it feels like. And she's like, oh my God, it's like dealing with a 5-year-old who just wants to go jump off the edge of something and doesn't realize there's not a net to catch her. So when we realize it's the archetype and it's not each other, the whole world opens up. So
I don't have to be mad at her.
So what are you guys seeing? What are you noticing from any of this conversation? We'd love to hear any ahas or answer any questions that you might have.
Trying to pull mine up so I can read it quickly, like all the little details with the thing that you sent from the assessment, and it was a while ago, like I was saying. But I'm not surprised at mine that the alchemist, the Maverick, and the nurturer. That seems like it's pretty natural. Like the alchemist, I love empowering others to believe in themselves. That really stands out for me. And for the Maverick, I usually don't care about cave into the opinion of others. Like I'm always trying to, let's just go for it. You know what I mean? And make the dreams come true. And then with the nurturer, I think I see this, you know, a lot of them, they're related, like the nurturer and the alchemist, I think, because I like to be there for others and give to others. And I do sometimes at my own detriment, you know what I mean? But it makes me happy, you know what I mean? So if I can keep doing this, so I'd like to make sure I generate enough to always be able to, but you know, it's kind of like my philosophy. I don't want to give a hand out. I'd rather give a hand up and help people grow. That's kind of how I look at, you know, all of this. So.
Well, you know, She is Hope LA is absolutely alchemist, right?
Yeah.
It's absolutely alchemist. It's the right thing to do. And the Maverick is throwing you in there, right? Because you're like, I don't care. This is big. It's huge. It's got to get done, right? It's just, so those two they happen to be working together in this case, right? And because you're so driven, you're making it happen. So that's awesome. And for those of you, so she's reading from, we sent, if after you take the assessment, you email us either the assessment or your top 3, we'll send you, I'll go grab an example. We have these beautiful cards that we can send you with a lot more detail about your personality type. So if somebody else has a question, it looks like, oh yeah. So yeah, Liz and Tisha both have some. So, so Pamela asked a question about how do you get the various parts to work together well? I mean, and part of it is with any kind of assessment is first you have to really understand your own. When you understand what drives you, when I realized, so my ex-husband has never taken this assessment, so I really don't know what his top archetypes are, but I'm pretty darn sure nurturer, he's probably nurturer, right? Like no boundaries, always trying to take, but it's a really, so, but nothing, there's no accumulator, no ruler, no maverick, right? None of that is in there. So what the question becomes, I used to blame him for my marriage and for the money. But at the end of the day, I really had to own, it was me, there was my part as a maverick that had a huge impact on our marriage and our money. There was a big part of my celebrity, my status needs, where I needed him to be bowing down to some degree to me, right? And the ruler, where I had to take care of the kingdom. And if you don't follow the rules, you need to go find another kingdom. And when I totally understood that that was what my marriage was about, I stopped blaming him. 100% stopped blaming him because I saw my part and there was no way I could go back and undo it. Now he had his part, right? But when I could completely own mine, I didn't blame him for the bankruptcy. I didn't blame him for my daughter being sick, none of it. So Pamela, just even spending some time really owning what you have done before you know, and then you can see how they all work together in your own life. So if I really want to get something done, it's like, who do I need today? Some days I need my maverick to come forward, and some days I need my ruler to come forward, and sometimes I have to dig deep and figure out, you know, how do I get an accumulator to come forward, right? Where can I add my relationship to rules? So it's once you start to understand them, then you can figure out. It's kind of like, do I put on my mom hat, my mean hat, my nasty hat, my woman hat, my sexy hat? We all have these different hats we wear. It's just a case of figuring out which hat you need in the moment. So hopefully that helped a little bit. What other kind of questions might you have or ahas have you seen? Pamela, are you coming off to make a statement? Okay, Pamela, I'm not sure if you're trying to say something. We can't hear you if you are. Oh, there we go. Now we hear you.
You can hear me? Okay, sorry. I'm
Okay.
I'm on my cell phone instead of my computer. So
It's
thank
okay.
you very much. That was very helpful and very insightful. So I do appreciate it. And
Okay,
I do
good.
see what you're saying about using the different parts. So very interesting.
Mhm.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for asking the question.
It's an interesting topic of conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, we have found, we have worked with women in all kinds of situations. You know, we have worked with, we just finished up a class where we had a couple of women who have been unemployed for a very, very long time. And out of doing the program, they they were able to take one woman, you know, really, she's completely run through every penny that she had. And she was trying to figure out, how do I start working in a pandemic? Right? How do I go out and work? I've got a 13-year-old kid. I'm afraid to go outside. I'm not sure what to do. And now she's not making millions by any stretch of the imagination, but she loves horses, and she tends to have a gift with regard to horses where, you know, she's can kind of, I don't want to call her a horse whisperer. I don't have a horse, so I really don't know exactly what she does, but she now is starting to work with people who have horses. And so the same horses that bring in chiropractors and, you know, different kinds of therapists for horses. We worked with her, started to get her up and running in terms of how does she make those phone calls? How does she send an email? How does she start to promote herself? Because she's been afraid to go outside, but she knew she could go out and be with horses because she didn't think she'd catch COVID with horses. And so she's started her own little business now. It's not paying all the bills, but it's paying a lot more of the bills than it was 4 months ago. So we know, you know, we have people in those kinds of situations. And we also have people who are making a big shift, you know, like Nermani is, who is, you know, they've had a corporate job forever. And they're like, I'm done with this. I really need to go do this other thing. I have this skill, but I actually don't know how to create it as a business. So we work with people on how do you create the business structure, you know, step 1, step 2, step 3, to make sure you know where your clients are, what's the market, so that you can see what you need to keep the business going. And then in between, Liz, with her financial work, oh my God, so amazing at helping women who I spend more money than I want to spend. I'm not sure why I spend it that way. And I keep saying, I'm not going to spend my money that way anymore, but I can't help it, right? I always have to buy that extra piece of chocolate. I always have to do this other thing, or I don't know why, but I keep sending my kids shoes, right? And then how do you get more income? I'm really good at, if I have another expense, I'll go out and make more money. But it took me a long time to realize that I just needed to stop having more expenses and take that money and put it into a savings account somewhere, right? So Liz is really masterful at helping people work through, you know, whether you're putting $1 a month away, or you're putting, you know, $10,000 a month away, help people work through the principles and get them moving forward. And shimmy, says Lizzie,
Shimmy.
They'll help you shimmy through the emotional piece, because it's always the emotions that get in the way. But we have the emotions and the archetypes. So Liz, is there anything you want to say?
I do want to add a little bit here because I think it's really important. I am truly dedicated, and Donna's too, but this is huge for me, to remove the trauma, guilt, and shame around money, period. Period. And there's a couple different ways that have to happen to do that. One, we kind of have to get over that we have to only learn about money behind closed doors or in a book. We do. We have to get over that. Everybody has a piece of the puzzle that makes it work. Everybody on here has a piece of information that is helpful for somebody else. And I see money as a couple different categories, but barely surviving means money is controlling you, right? Money is just controlling you, and you don't have a lot of control over it. And you could have a lot of guilt and shame and trauma. You can't go from that to thriving or manifesting money overnight. And that's where a lot of more trauma comes from. And I'm just going to say that out loud because I think that people go, oh, I just need to manifest it. And if it doesn't work, you're creating more trauma for yourself, period. But what can happen? Well, you take a look at your situation and go, oh my gosh, what do I need to do just to get to safety? If you can get from trauma to safety, right? And there's a couple of things that can happen. There's lots of books out there. There's lots of organizations that can help with that. Then you can go into a situation where you can start to control money. And that's fantastic that we can do that in such a way that, like, okay, well, money is not, I make good money, but I can't afford what I truly want. Or sometimes I control it. Sometimes it controls me, my personalities, my romantic takes over, this, that, and the other, right? So I believe that if we can all get to a point where we can recognize when guilt, shame, and trauma are steps away or that we're making decisions there. That's important, but also to recognize that, you know, it is okay to talk to other people about your situation. And once we realize that we don't have to judge each other at all, because we all have something, right? And that we can sit there in a safe place listening and offering an ear to hear. Sometimes that's all people need to be able to get the step they need to step up. So this is really important to me. And so I talked about that normally more longer than I do, but when we see guilt, shame, and trauma, life happens to everybody, right? And we can often tell when that situation is happening and they can't quickly get somewhere. So you just have to recognize that the emotions are telling you that an old pattern is running. We just have to recognize the old pattern and then learn to break it. And then the guilt and shame, you're like, oh my God, eventually move away because we have a totally different perspective at this point in time. And that I've had guilt and shame about different things. You know, sometimes about money and sometimes about other things in my life. So
I think that's so important. That's something I think it's consistent across the board with every topic and everything I'm doing with this nonprofit. You've got to talk and share. So many women, well, people in general, but especially women, are ashamed. You know, they're embarrassed. They don't want to look, they don't want to share a lot of things. They don't want people to know. And I need people to know you're not alone with anything, you know, any issue that you're going through. People do experience it, and we're here to help share and lift each other up. So thank you.
there was somebody in one of our some of our circle conversations that we were doing for financial visioning work. And Dawn introduced herself and said, you know, I have filed bankruptcy. And the woman goes, oh my God, I have two in her head. I have two. And she felt so inspired to go share that story with somebody else. And then other people can also learn from her that you can get out of it. There are ways out of it. So I think it gives hope to realize that we don't have to do this alone. So I lost the chat when I got booted from the system. I do want to talk for a minute about, okay, Ellen's question. What about the scarcity mindset? And I don't know if you addressed this, Dawn. One of the things we do is if somebody's in that barely surviving, we have classes you can do on your own. But a lot of times I've noticed in my life that the scarcity mindset comes up when I'm looking at my life from a past perspective. Like my skill sets are only so limited, and I've tried to do this before and it didn't work. And then I go and try and create my future, and then in creating my future, I'm actually bringing the past forward with me. So if you're in the scarcity mindset or in the safety, you can always vision a different future. But what I find scarcity mindset comes up is when I bring the past forward in my visioning of what I want to create. So we do a Merlin visioning exercise, which we started the hour with, in 5 years from now, what is it you want to create? And when you look at you wanted to create something, you can be like, oh, this is what I really want. There's probably a muscle memory that comes up as you're writing, this is what I want. And you're like, I tried this before and it didn't work, right? Well, a lot of times when we're looking towards the future and something to create, we are sitting in our seat looking forward. And when we look forward, and Dawn does a much better job of explaining this than I do, so she might come in any second, all we see is obstacles. When you're sitting in this seat looking forward, I see everything that could possibly go wrong. So what does it do? It stops me in my tracks before I even start. Right? So a lot of times that's what I see scarcity mindset is. It's the past playing over and over again, going, we've tried this, remember? And that's also because I'm sitting here looking forward.
Emma,
And-
were you going to say something? I thought I saw.
I was just agreeing. I didn't realize I was muted.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and Liz, what you're bringing up is really important. So this whole Merlin piece, what we focus on. So we have this online program, and if you want to do it's $149, and you do it at your own pace, and you get to keep the workbooks. And if you can't afford it, you send us an email. We have people that are making, we have scholarships available for people so they can take this course on their own. And it gives you this you start looking out into the future, and you keep working backwards. And what you do in this program is you really focus on, what do you know how to do? There's always a bunch of stuff that's going to show up that you don't know how to do. But if you focus on the things that you know how to do, then all of a sudden, some of the stuff you thought you needed, you really don't. A lot of people think, I got to start a business. They have a dream of a business 5 years from now. And today they're like, I need a logo. No, you don't. You don't need a logo. You need content. You need to tell people what you're working on, but nobody looks at them. How many of you remember what our logo looks like? I mean, you don't, right? I kind of remember Tisha's is kind of red. Maybe there's a heart or something, but I don't think about her logo, right? So you start to work on the stuff that you know how to do. You know how to coach, you know who to talk to, you know how to dance, you know how to do your thing, how do you take the fashion world that and how are you going to translate that into the world of, senior care, right? How do we take what we know and start to leverage it into our new future? And so we have various versions of this program where people are working on it for a year with us. They work on it on their own very intensely with us for 6 weeks, because and then you start to see, oh, I need a little bit of Maverick over here. Crap, accumulator, get out of the way. I don't need you right now. I need my dreamer. Go sit down. I'll bring you back in a few minutes, right? So it doesn't matter if the dream is, I want a bigger apartment, or I want a multi-million-dollar coaching business. The principles are the same. And, but we recognize, and it's not even about leadership work. It's about, you got to understand the emotional stuff that's behind it. You have thoughts and feelings that kind of do this circle. I have a thought and a feeling and a thought and a feeling. And it's like this do loop, right? There's a bunch of different versions of it. And then that's what causes you to take action or no action. And then the actions lead to your results. So in the programs, you start to look at, how do I interrupt either my thought? I'm really good at interrupting thoughts. Liz is really good at interrupting emotions. What's the emotion that's there right now? And then we take a real hard look. What did you do? Well, I thought about what did you do? What was the actual action that you took? And what is the actual result? Well, I think my result was no. How much money was it? $100.05, or was it about 250? We don't care about. You start to get a relationship to reality and your emotions and your thoughts so that you can start to interrupt them to have the future that you want. But it's this emotional piece that Liz brings that really rocks the world for it. Because if you think about it, a lot of you guys, let's say you wanted to run a marathon, you got to buy some shoes and you got to start to walk, and then you got to start to jog, and then you can run, right? But you don't go from never running to running a marathon. But just because you know how to do it doesn't mean you're going to, right? Or if you wanted to lose weight, you know what it takes to lose weight. It doesn't mean you're going to do it or you haven't tried it. It's the emotional underpinning that stops it. And Liz really helps us dig in to the emotional side of it. I'm always learning. I'm always learning even about my own emotional side. I cut that off a long time ago. So working with her, I've really learned how to be way more vulnerable when it comes to money and, moving forward in the future. So. You guys have other
thoughts? A lot
thoughts
of
or questions?
information. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's all good stuff. What questions? What you need to learn on a budget? And budgets, I'm just going to throw this out there. Budgets often feel really restrictive. And there's a way to create a budget that's a yes and versus either or. How do you have a spending plan that allows you to have some fun and rejuvenation versus feel like you're just in deprivation? And if there's no way to have rejuvenation based on the amount of money that you're making, then, we take a look at maybe, is there a way to make more money? Yeah. Questions, aha, shout outs. Ivy,
This
you
is
look like
great.
you
It helps
have a
us think
question at
about
all
our choices.
times.
I like that you're making us think about the different styles and how to put things together, because you're right. One will go ahead of the other sometimes, and one wins out the fight at the time. So it's just good to be aware of it. I find it interesting, like the workshop that you have, maybe talk about a couple of other ways or things that you guys offer too. It would be nice to know.
Yeah. Well, and the exercise that, and this is not even, a lot of times our biggest fear is that we're gonna lose all the money that we have. And Tisha, you even said that you'd, end up living under a bridge with your two children, right? That's our biggest fear, is that, we won't be able to take care of ourselves or our loved ones. And if you really sat there and imagined yourself in that situation, you probably would figure out a way out of it. And a lot of times we feel like, oh, this situation would be above us. It would happen to me and I would have no control. But if it happens, hopefully there would be a series of events that would allow you could see happening that would get you out of it, and that you do have the skills to get yourself out of it, and that it wouldn't just be happening to you. And that's everyone's biggest worst case scenario, is that.
But if you even just look around at your life today, think about pre-COVID, right? If you think about this past year, who would have predicted COVID and what it did to all of our 5-year goals and dreams, or how it impacted our relationships, or our kids in school, or our jobs, or whatever it might have been. But if you have a, since we can't predict the future, but we certainly didn't think it was going to look like this. But if you had a focus on what you wanted, then when COVID came, you're still focused on what you want versus being at the effect of it. And I know sometimes that's really hard. It's really hard to think about a future sometimes. But if you look around at anything that you have in your world that you love, like if you just look around wherever you live, there's something in there in your world that you love, whether it's a piece of clothing, a piece of furniture, it could be the house that you live in, it could be, there's something there, but 5 years ago, you may not have, you didn't envision it, but you have it. It just happened. So if you know things are going to keep happening, now is an interesting time to start thinking about, well, if I could have a say in what's going to happen, what would I say? Like a curiosity, right? What could it look like if I had a new couch? When I think about Liz talking about her cottage, and I would never want a cottage because I don't want to be tied down to a place. But boy, but an option is I could maybe part own a cottage or part own several cottages, right? Or I just have someone I meet someone who's so rich, they just let me use the cottage whenever. Do I have to own it? Do I actually need a mortgage? When you start to say, here's what I want, we often think we have to own it. We have to buy it. We have to spend for it. We have to maintain it. But what if you could have the things you want in a way you hadn't expected? Right? And especially for a lot of us who are strong, independent women who have got to figure it out on our own, that usually means we have to buy it, own it, get the loan for it, figure it out, when really there's somebody's got an extra one hanging out. They'd love to give it to me. But we don't think about that. Right? So it's just all Liz and I are really interested in many ways is helping you think newly differently about what you want. You know, the way you're thinking may or may not have supported you to this place. But if we just opened up a new little window into a future or a way to do things, it could cause a domino effect in having what you want. So I feel like I was rambling there a little bit. I apologize if I was.
No, I don't think you were. I think it's about changing the perception of how we see our lives and how it maybe our vision of what we think should be is not always what it should be, and being adaptable. Because I always thought, oh, I have to do it all myself because that's going to prove that I'm independent and yada, yada, yada. And now I'm at a point where I'm like, no, I actually would love for somebody to take out the trash for me. You know?
Right?
And it's just that mirror, and it took me shifting and me changing that perception to be able to realize that it is okay for somebody else to take the trash out, period. It doesn't mean you're not independent anymore, and it doesn't mean you're not strong. It just means that, you know what, that's one less thing I have to do.
Mm-hmm.
I was reading the other day that like extreme independence is a response to trauma, and we all have trauma of some way, shape, or form. And I was like, oh yeah, I don't, and trusting other people and stuff like that. And I'm right there with you. I'm like, yes, I want somebody to take out the garbage. Yes, I would love some of this other stuff. And people are getting creative on how to do money in community. There are people who are married that buy a house that they couldn't afford, but they rent out the rooms to other people, to friends, until they have children and they have better paying jobs. So then they can have this house, they can afford it and all this other stuff until, you know, later on when they're making more money. So there's always a way. It's just not always the way that you may have thought about it.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
I think this is great because I think this whole last year, when I see everybody that's been struggling, I'm like, what have you always wanted to do? Chase your dreams, make it happen. But you're putting on that twist like, hey, you know, it's not that far out of reach. You just might need to twist how you're looking at it and how you can achieve it. I love that. I think that's great because I'm very focused. Like I know what I'm doing and I'm chasing it and I'm going for it. And I know I talk to a lot of people and they're like, how do you do it? And I'm like, I just know what I want to do and give back. I don't want people to go through what I went through. And I have a very clear path of what I've set on how to get there. And yes, it's a journey, but it's fun and I love it. And it's a very passionate thing for me. But I know it's not as easy for everyone, but if you pick something you've always wanted to do or always wanted in your life, this is, you know, you're offering a, you know, twist. Hey, maybe you can attack it a different way and it's not so out of reach that way. And I think it's lovely.
Well, and even like if Gay Ellen, if I can use your example of being the Zumba Gold person, right? If, you know, once you know what it takes to become that person, right? There's certain characteristics, right, to be called that. And then then we work backwards and say, here's what it is. And then that means before. So the way the Merlin process works is, so let's say I wanted to be on Tony Robbins, right? Let's say I wanted to be on his stage. There's a podcaster who is always on his stage. And she has 500,000 followers in her podcasts and over 5,000 downloads. So I thought, okay, in 5 years, if I wanted 500,000 podcasts and 5,000 downloads, then if I step back and say the year before that, I probably needed about maybe 400,000 followers and 2,500 podcasts. And then I step back and then I say, all right, the year before that if maybe 100,000 followers and I don't know, what is 2,500 divided by 2? So year 3, I've got about 1,700, 1,500 podcasts. Well, if I do a podcast every day for 3 years, that gets me in the 1,500, almost 1,800 podcasts. So then I'm like, oh, 5,000 5 years from now sounds like a ton. But if I just do one every day, that's 365 in a year. And in 3 years, I'm at 1,800, right? I'm well on my way to 5,000. But if I stand here and I say 5,000, oh God, there's no way. But when you start to take it and inch it back, and then I can ask the question, what does it take to produce one podcast a day? All right, so I need an hour to write. Now I need to learn the technology. Who do I know? Because I don't know anything about that technology. But it all of a sudden breaks it down into manageable little pieces, no matter what dream you have. Right? So, and so when you can get that kind of freedom, it's amazing, no matter what your dream is.
Bite-sized chunks or bonbons, you know, however you want to look at it.
That's right.
Absolutely.
I think what Tisha said was really strong, because sometimes I tend to fluctuate. I want this, no, I don't want that. Like I'm not sure that I want to be in Zumba and Drums Alive at some point, but now I'm feeling like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, what I wanted to say was, Tisha, when you said, I have a clear vision, and so she's going for it. I don't know yet that I have a clear vision other than what I just told you about having a husband and, you know, teaching as a senior. But your clear vision sounds clearer than mine. Your clear vision says, I'm a strong woman, I'm going to go for it. Mine says, I'm 67 and I'm tired. And I want to be different, and I don't know how.
Well, here's what I'm going to say. Let's not focus on how. Just set how aside. How is all the obstacles? How is the obstacles? So every time you go, how do I get that? So if you get really clear on the vision, that you have someone to share it with, and that this person will make you feel loved and connected, and that you're able to travel and have experiences, give example of those experiences. I am living life and enjoying it by teaching Zumba and staying mobile, and the money is coming in to have these experiences, and you're not sure how. But why are these things important? Why is it important to have somebody in your life? How would you feel when that person's in your life? When we focus on how before we have the clarity, all we see is the obstacles, if that makes any sense. And it's a lot of people can get stuck there, and it's because you're like, how can I possibly get there from here? So define here or define there, and just keep defining there. Keep getting curious, and then say, how would I feel? And then when you're doing Zumba and you're dancing and you're doing Zumba and you're listening to the drums, just imagine that this partner's in your life and go, I have this partner, I feel really connected. And wow, we get to do things together and experience new things, and like going to the whatever, all the things that you have on your list. You're not quite sure how it's going to happen.
Well, just like I was invited to this really big meeting next weekend. It's totally free. All I need to do is get there. And I told them I can't come. I don't know why I told them I can't come. I have no idea.
Then change it and go, make it happen.
Yeah.
You know, did you watch that vision workshop from last weekend? I think that'll be good for you to see, because
I did. I
be
have to
good.
watch it again. Yeah. And they've done these. I'm stopping myself.
And Gail, and it's only because the possibility is not present for you. The past is the past is right in front of you instead of the possibility, the why, the emotional future. And that really becomes, you know, you've got to make a choice. It's not always easy, but you make one choice by even just saying I'm coming. You still don't have to go, but by changing your mind, right? Telling them that you're going to come sets a whole different set of things forward, instead of, oh, I'm going to sit home and I wish I wouldn't have sat home and I probably should have said yes, right? Or whatever those things that you say. Instead, when you say, I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to do whatever I can to get there, then
I did say yes and I backed down.
all right, well, tell them what you can tell them. I thought I couldn't, but now it turns out that
I
I
know.
absolutely can. But it just puts different circumstances moving forward, because, and that's why what Liz was pointing to is the why. Thinking about, why is this important? You want to feel it emotionally, because it's the why that keeps you moving, not the thing. It's the experience that keeps you moving forward on a goal or a dream.
I'm going to drive over and give you a big hug, Gail. Okay, you're just down the street from me. Come on.
I'll meet you at the park tomorrow morning at 8:30, my dear.
I'm driving to Lake Arrowhead to show properties, but I can go meet you earlier.
And Naomi, I don't know if you have the hand raised to add to Galen, or if you have a question.
Yeah.
For you.
Can I share something? So I'm married with my husband, and he's very controlling, and he's very controlling. He gets enraged. So I was always in fear. So, when he asked me, you have to ask me permission to buy anything, even bread. But I got tired of this, and I wanted to get out of this. So just like, Galen said, my vision is not clear. So when Tisha said, she is so focused, I'm envy her, how clear it is. But still, I wanted to go from point A here, from somewhere B. My vision is not clear, but I started creating a personal, secret bank account. When I opened bank account, I was such a fear. But now I started depositing here in little money. I got used to. So to me, that's my baby step. So for Galen, going to meeting might be a fear, but once you do it one time, maybe next time you feel better. So I want to move much faster forward, but something also stopping me, because I'm a mother, raising 2 kids, doing all the stuff, and I'm also doing the work. So my brain is constantly thinking about the school, about the food, what I cook, how I drive, where to go. So even I want to focus on, starting new business or something, I'm not moving forward fast enough. That's my frustration.
Okay, well, you know what? To speak on that, though, I have to admit, it took me a long time to get my clarity, because I was in survival mode for so long. But I knew when I was going through it, I'm like, gosh, this is wrong. Gosh, too many people are going through this. When I get to a point, I'm going to do something. And it took me time to get to that. But it was, my motivation was, I was scared. You know what I mean? I was so upset at what I had gone through. And then I found out it was a very common theme as I talked to more women, and it infuriated me. And I thought, that's it, I'm done. I want to do something about it. Plus my kids gave me the strength to get through a lot of this. You know what I mean? I think I probably would have been on the street if I didn't have them, because it was just so hard to get back on my feet. But once I decided and knew where I could make a difference, I just went for it. And, I've had people kind of help me like laser it in, but I know what I can do, know what we can offer, you know what I mean? And as this nonprofit, and even with real estate, like I'm tying everything together, so I can make sure it's long-term and self-sustaining. So, but it took me time. So listen, you guys, don't beat yourself up for that. It is a process. And please, I don't want that to be anything upsetting you. You will get there.
I'm not, thank you so much. You're my inspiration, because you're living like proof. So when I see you, I feel like someday I'll be like you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Hey, listen,
And
I'm
just
still on my journey. We all are.
Yeah, and the barely surviving to safety, it's a step, right? So that's your first thing that you try and get clarity around, is what would that safety look like? I have enough money coming in that I can buy the bread and the milk for the kids. I have enough, I don't have to ask permission. There's continuous money coming in. I have the freedom to go and buy the groceries. I have the freedom. And it may not be to say yes to soccer and ballet or symphony or whatever for the children or for the family, but you know what the next step is. That's the first thing you start with. Mm-hmm. And then those people that are there, their Merlin philosophy is a little bit bigger, right? But it's really hard to go from barely surviving into I have a $10 million company in 5 years from now. Your body is going to resist that. It says, this is not our experience, and all we're going to see is obstacles. Yeah.
And Gail, and by the way, look at what you've done. You're now, you used to take Zumba. I remember you at the YMCA, and now you're an instructor because you love it and you're passionate and you're giving back to people. So, and you're just so sweet and you're following what you love to do. So you are taking steps in the right direction. I want you to know that.
And if you feel like you're backed into a corner and you're like ready to come out fighting, like you don't like what's happening, and I don't care how much money you have, but if you feel like you're backed in the corner and you want to fight, you're not fighting because you're fighting about what's in front of you. It's because you're so aware of what you do want, you're unwilling to sit in the corner any longer. Like it's like you woke up and it's like, no, I am not going to sit here in this corner and just die, whether it's an emotional death or a physical death. When you're ready to come out fighting, it's because you do have a dream. You may not have it fully articulated yet, but you only take action when the emotion really drives you. So yeah, Gail.
I just wanted to share that for anybody, the people that do make a living doing Zumba, they are knocking themselves out. I mean, they are, and so I'm not there. So what I did though is I went to the Work Source Center, and I got approved for a course in human resources and project management. So that course starts on the 19th. And now I'm telling myself, well, why are you putting one more thing on your plate? You still have to study, Drums Alive, and you still have to rehearse, but I need a vocation. So that's what I decided to do.
You recognize that you need that and you're going for it. So good job.
Yeah.
It's really good. All right, cool. Does anybody else have any questions or anything that they want to ask Liz and Dawn? Okay, cool. Anything else you ladies want to add? This has been really great. Thank you.
Just send us your information on your assessments if you want to get more detail. We have a video if you haven't seen the video. And if you want to take one of the courses, we'll make it happen. You know what I mean? Don't let money stop you. And if time's an issue, we can talk to you about that too. Because it's really, this is it, not a dress rehearsal. My mission is, people live to their full potential and die with no regrets. So I'm here for that.
Good deal. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. That's nice to hear and know. This has been phenomenal. Thank you all for joining us today. Go enjoy the rest of your beautiful day and the rest of this weekend. Liz, and it looks like Liz got cut off again. Poor thing.
Yeah.
The joys of this whole technology thing. I know I've been bounced off a few. It's not fun. I upgraded and we still are. It's not right. But thank you all for joining us today. Have a great day, everyone. Okay. And
bye, everybody.
If you want more information, I can connect you all. All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.